the financial tool that may supercharge your share portfolio, potentially saving you very precious time, tax dollars, and even enjoy a greater financial freedom and independence. Welcome back, everyone, to Sugar Mama's Fire Play, the podcast that is here to empower you with valuable financial education in a fun, exciting, and inspiring way. I am financial planner Canna Campbell. So today's episode is a listener request. I received a DM via Instagram asking if I could do an episode on margin loans. Not just what they are and how they work, but how to use them to help you achieve your financial goals and dreams sooner, but also what to do if something goes wrong. Now, because there is a lot to cover in this particular topic, I'm going to break it up over 2 episodes, with a bonus episode being published this Thursday. So you don't need to worry about having to wait around for too long. You're going to get all of this very valuable, insightful, and informative content all this week, I promise. So today I'm just going to focus on the 101s of margin loans, including understanding the risks and of course the benefits, and most importantly, which I'm really going to hone in on, and that is how to manage these risks in a smart, effective, and proactive way. Then on Thursday, I'm going to share with you what I would look for when it comes to picking a margin loan product. I'm also going to touch on other ideas, options, and strategies that also may be helpful if you aren't ready for margin lending or you want to look at other ideas around borrowing to invest. So make sure that you've hit the subscribe or following button to my podcast channel so that you don't need to worry about missing this very valuable and informative episodes. Now, before we begin, I have to uphold my industry's very important compliance requirements via ASIC, and that is to remind you that all of my free content, including this episode, is always general in nature and never personal investment or product or even strategic advice, particularly as we're talking about margin lending. And you can always refer to my financial planning license details in the podcast notes at any time. And of course, if you ever want personal advice, please go and talk to a licensed and qualified financial planner. All right, so first of all, what is a margin loan? Well, a margin loan is a secured loan that allows you to borrow money to invest. The money is borrowed under a margin loan facility and is secured against the investments of the borrower, that is their portfolio. So if your share portfolio is worth, say, $20,000 and you want to borrow, say, $20,000 to maybe buy some more shares, the loan is secured by your entire share portfolio. So this is very similar to the way that you'd buy a home or an investment property. That is, you have a deposit to put down and you purchase that home, and the home is up as security. That is what secures and gives you the loan by the bank. So they are the same concept. So if you want to take out a margin loan to build your portfolio, you need to have capital to borrow against in the first place. And this could be via cash savings or investments like managed funds. But for most people, it's actually usually secured against an existing share portfolio that they already have or have been slowly and steadily building up over time. Now, there is an important but very easy calculation that you need to know and understand when it comes to margin loans, and that is your LVR, loan to value ratio. So in this case, the loan is, say, $20,000 and the gross value of the share portfolio is $40,000. So 20 divided by 40 times by 100 gives us an LVR of 50%. Now, I will talk about this LVR in a second, but I just want you to remember this formula. It is the loan divided by the gross value of the portfolio times by 100. Okay, and this is a very valuable guide that will help keep your share portfolio and your margin loan in a safe zone. But as I said, I'll come to this in a second. Now, is margin lending risky? Yes, most definitely. It is not for everyone. However, these risks can be controlled to a certain degree, which I will come to and actually really hone in on in a bit. And obviously, it goes without saying, all borrowing comes with risk, whether it's a credit card, a home loan, investment property, you name it. If it's borrowing to invest, there are risks. However, the difference is that if you know what you are doing and you do it in the right way for the right reasons at the right time, and you've got some smart, savvy, proactive safety nets in place, this is now different risk. It's educated, informed risks. And you can put smart, proactive strategies in place to help reduce these risks substantially. Now, margin lending in the past, particularly during the GFC, got a really bad rap. But when you look beyond the headlines and you actually read what was going on behind the scenes, both by the investors and the product issuers, you can see why people got burnt. And these people who had things backfire on them is because they had crazy strategies in place, like a LVR as high as 90%. And people were actually starting off with loans of 90% when they first began, which is crazy, silly behavior. And on top of that, some of these people had their interest capitalizing. Now, when someone's interest is capitalizing, to me, this is a big red flag. But it means instead of the interest being paid out of the cash flow, instead it is simply being added to the loan, making the loan bigger and bigger over time, compounding. So for example, say I took out a margin loan of say $10,000 and my interest rate for simplicity is say 7%. If my interest is capitalizing, I'm not actually paying that $700 per year out of my cash flow. Instead, I'm opting in to have it added to the loan. So in 1 year's time, my margin loan is not $10,000 anymore. It's actually now $10,700. And then as you can imagine, 7% now applied on the $10,700 each year, year after year after year, that margin loan gets bigger and bigger. Nonetheless, though, even though I'm painting probably a very negative picture, margin loans can actually really add leverage to your investments, your wealth creation journey, and of course help you build greater passive income streams. Which means when it comes to margin lending, if it goes well and you set it up correctly in a safe, intelligent way, it can actually really help you achieve your financial goals sooner. And it does this by obviously increasing the potential size of your returns. So say that you have $20,000 in shares and you borrow another $20,000 to buy more shares. Your portfolio is worth $40,000 and is compounding with a larger base amount. So if the market rises by 10%, your gain is now $4,000 instead of $2,000. You're using borrowed money to buy more passive income streams, and you're buying assets that grow in value over the long run. And if you are buying industrial stocks that have franking credits, you are buying and building tax-effective passive income streams. Tax-effective passive income streams that can be really, really important, particularly as you approach retirement. And if you're borrowing money to help build greater diversification within your portfolio, you're actually using gearing to help reduce risk. And of course, borrowing to invest gives you the opportunity to consistently contribute towards your wealth creation journey, which is something that you may have not been able to do at the same level without access to this gearing tool. So this, as in borrowing to invest, is how a lot of people become wealthy. They achieve their goals, their financial goals, and they build those growing passive income streams. They borrow to acquire assets that grow in value over the long run. And this is probably the number one key benefit of this type of financial product. However, a margin loan and all types of borrowing can also amplify losses when things don't go to plan. So using the same example, if the market falls by 10%, your portfolio would be down $2,000 if you hadn't borrowed. But if you had borrowed that $20,000 with your existing $20,000, your portfolio is down now $4,000. Plus, you still have that existing $20,000 margin loan in place, plus the continued ongoing cost via the interest on that loan. So you've got to obviously repay that $20,000 margin loan and continue to service the interest on that loan. So you can see how things can go wrong if it isn't set up correctly. Now, there is also the risk of a margin call. A margin call is a warning that you need to bring your margin account back to a healthy level again in comparison to the size of your portfolio and the size of the loan. This is where the LVR calculation comes back in. So in our example, $20,000 loan, giving you $40,000 worth of shares, gives us an LVR of 50%. But say the market becomes exceptionally volatile, which to a certain degree is very normal and natural over the short to medium term. And the value of this $40,000 share portfolio, say, drops to $30,000. Our new LVR will be $20,000 divided by $30,000 times by 100, which means our LVR is now much, much higher. It's sitting around 66%. Now, most margin loans get triggered when the LVR exceeds 75% or more. However, this can vary on the loan provider and the underlying stock that is within the portfolio. But you can see how the drop in the portfolio can dramatically and quickly raise your LVR and put you into a danger zone. Now, say this portfolio continued to drop with the LVR exceeding the loan's, baseline or threshold of 75%, and you start to trigger a margin call. Now, if this would happen, you would then need to either deposit cash against your margin loan, reducing that loan, or transfer additional securities that you may have. Now, for example, this might be shares that you own on a different portfolio or on a different platform. You would have to quickly or swiftly transfer any shares that you might have attached to a different HIN number or a different platform and transfer it against your margin loan so there is more security down there to help keep that LVR back in a safe zone again. Or the other option, which is the least desirable one, and that is to sell some of the shares to help reduce the loan and get that loan back in a safe level again. And should a margin loan ever happen or may happen, your loan provider will always let you know the dollar figures that you will need to look at to help return your LVR back to a safe zone. Now, selling the shares during a downturn is not ideal. It means that you have to potentially crystallize some losses. And ideally, you never want to be in a position where the only option is to sell. So having separate cash set aside or having additional shares that you can transfer across to help avoid having to sell is always the best solution. So this now leads me to what is the best way of managing these risks of a margin call. Well, the good news is there are lots of ideas and strategies and solutions. So I'm going to share all of them with you right now. So the first thing is to keep your portfolio consolidated. That is, if you have multiple portfolios on different platforms or attached to different HINs, it pays to have them all consolidated on the one account. And you can do this with advice from your accountant, ideally avoiding having to sell so you don't trigger CGT, but you do an in-specie transfer so that all your shares are on the one HIN number which is attached to that margin loan. That will help lower your LVR depending on the quality of the stocks in your portfolio. And it means you have greater security against that loan, which is always a great option. In fact, they did a study that if you had a margin loan in place during the GFC and your margin loan never exceeded 50%, you never triggered a margin call. So this is a really great rule to follow when it comes to thinking about margin lending. Keep your LVR around about 50%. The third suggestion, and that is to treat your margin loan like a principal and interest loan so that the loan is naturally reducing. So instead of setting up your margin loan as an interest-only loan, you actually set it up so that you're paying more than the interest. You're actually chipping away at the principal, which again means your LVR is coming down in an organic way. Now, when it comes to setting this up, you can actually do it in two different ways. You can agree with your loan provider to have a certain amount paid per month that is above the current interest rate, or you can make ad hoc transfers to your margin loan provider when your cash flow permits so that that loan is coming down. But always keep your eye on your margin loan so that you know exactly how much you owe and you can see it's actually reducing and in alignment to your goals. Now, you do need to get advice around this because the general rule when it comes to loans is you always prioritize your non-deductible debt before your deductible debt. However, this is something that I'm talking about purely in isolation when it comes to managing margin loan risk. So bear that in mind. The fourth suggestion is to have your dividends paid to your loan. So instead of actually spending your dividends, you may want to look at having those dividends paid towards the loan. So you can have your dividends deposited directly in the account number and BSB that you list with your share registry, or you can have those dividends paid to a separate dedicated savings account, and then you do manual transfers against the loan, paying it down. But using your dividends is a great way of keeping your LVR in place and obviously helping reducing that loan over time. And it is the same principle when it comes to, an investment property portfolio. The rent helps pay or service the actual underlying loan. The fifth tip is to ensure that your portfolio is properly diversified, ideally between, say, 20 to 30 different stocks. Now, by doing this, it means that if one or two or three of your particular stocks in your portfolio suffer a dramatic short-term pullback, it doesn't dramatically impact your LVR because you've got 20 or 25 or 27 other stocks that are hanging in there helping support the portfolio. Another great tip is to stick to blue chip industrial stocks that have a high LVR threshold. You see, when you look at different margin loans, you will see that they have higher LVRs quite often for those blue chip industrial stocks, the supermarkets, the banks, the healthcare companies, the transportation companies, which means they are less likely to trigger a margin call than, say, some other stocks that have an lower LVR, such as, maybe tech stocks. And that's not to say don't invest in tech stocks. No, definitely not. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you may want to use your loan to acquire assets that have a high LVR so that you are really pushing that boundary far away from you from actually coming close to triggering a margin call. The next suggestion is to have enough emergency money set aside so that you can really avoid having to be in a situation where you have to crystallize losses by selling those stocks that are down in value. In fact, everyone should have emergency money, but if you have emergency money and a margin loan, make sure you factor that into how much emergency money you really need. Another great suggestion is to regularly check your LVR. Even though you're going to get an email, a text message, and even a phone call, when it comes to maybe potentially triggering a margin call, you always want to stay informed and ahead of the game, so that if you are sailing close to the wind with your LVR, you have the benefit of time to help you get ahead and into a safe zone before you get that phone call or text message. So say, for example, I log into my margin loan and I can see my LVR is maybe sitting at 65% or 66%, and that my loan provider has a margin loan threshold around, say, 70% or 75%. By knowing that that is getting quite close, and that if we do hit another turbulent period in the market, I may actually run the risk of getting a margin call, I have the benefit of time before that phone call or text message comes in to go, all right, I might need to transfer some cash onto my margin loan to reduce my LVR into a safe zone again. Or perhaps I can transfer some shares I own on another portfolio into this account so that it sits in a safer zone again. So regularly check your LVR. The next tip is to factor in even more future interest rate rises into your budget. I would never recommend someone take out a margin loan where the cost of that loan through the interest repayments makes their budget even tighter. You should be able to afford your margin loan interest repayments on a comfortable level, so that if interest rates go up, and they may quite possibly continue on going up, you are still going to be able to comfortably service that loan, and you never need to worry about your margin loan interest capitalizing. So make sure before you take out a loan that you can comfortably service your margin loan with further interest rate rises. And if you already have a margin loan in place, run some numbers and have a look at what would happen to your budget if your margin loan interest rate went up, say, 2 or 3% more. Now, you may want to consider prepaying your margin loan 1 year in advance. Now, this can be really helpful when it comes to tax deductions because obviously the interest on your margin loan is tax deductible. But this can then mean you actually get the opportunity to fix your interest rate because you are prepaying the interest on your loan. So again, another valuable tool when it comes to managing the risk. And then, of course, when it comes to your margin loan and managing that LVR in a sensible way, you don't need to draw down the full amount. Just because your margin loan provider has given you, say, $50,000 to invest in your share portfolio, that doesn't necessarily mean you should be investing that full $50,000 straight away. Actually, just draw down, say, $5,000 initially, and then maybe 2 months later, draw down and invest another $10,000, and slowly use up that $50,000 that's available to you. Or perhaps you just invest, say, $25,000 initially and just sit on that for a couple of years. Take it slow and steady. Just because it is there doesn't mean you need to draw down the whole amount. And for the record, you only pay interest on what you draw down. $20,000 of that, I'm wasting precious interest. No, you're only going to pay the interest on what you draw down. And then finally, another great strategy when it comes to managing your LVR, and that is to consider a regular gearing plan. A regular gearing plan is where you invest on a regular basis, but it is backed dollar for dollar. So for example, you would invest $500 per month of your own money, and that is matched by a $500 per month investment margin loan, so that you are actually investing $1,000 per month. And of course, this would mean, your total borrowing is $6,000 per year. But it is a nice way of just slowly and steadily looking and learning about how to use gearing in your wealth creation journey. Now, I will talk about this idea of a regular gearing plan in Thursday's episode. Now, this then brings me to the particular questions that this listener had. And that was, what would happen if I've used all my cash savings to prepay my interest, paying 1 year in advance, and then suddenly I get a margin call? Now, there are two separate issues with this. So the first point I want to make is, if you are prepaying your interest on your margin loan 1 year in advance, that needs to come out of your cash savings. My second point is, you need to have separate emergency money for that margin call. If you are using up all of your emergency money or all of your savings to prepay that interest on your loan, you need to prioritize building up some emergency money immediately. So for this particular person, what I would suggest to them is that they don't take out a margin loan until they have enough money to pay the interest and they have enough money in emergency money. Using cash to prepay your interest is not something that comes out of your emergency money. They are two separate expenses and safety nets. Now, the second question that I was asked by this particular person was, I have $20,000 in shares and I've been approved for a $20,000 margin loan. Should I go and invest the full $20,000? Now, I can't give personal advice. I don't know anything about this particular person's risk profile, their deadlines for their goals, what emergency money they might have, what other debts they may have, what insurance policies they may have in force. But as explained before, you do not need to draw down the full amount. That is that $20,000 in one big hit. You can take it slow and steady. You should never do something that you don't understand. You need to make sure that you understand all of the risks before you take action. And also, you should always make sure that you understand all the benefits that come with what your financial decision is all about. I would never recommend someone go head first when it comes to gearing. As I said, borrowing to invest is risky. So perhaps consider drawing down, say, $5,000 initially. Or perhaps say to yourself, well, I'm going to draw down $2,000 per month for the next 10 months. That is how I'm going to use the $20,000 facility that's been made available to me. And some other great, words of wisdom or advice are, and that is to make sure you are using that borrowed money to add further diversification to your portfolio if you need it. You also want to make sure that you can handle any further interest rate rises, and you are comfortably servicing the loan at the rate that you are drawing it down, and that you are using your dividends wisely. You are using those dividends to help pay down the loan, or perhaps to reinvest back into your portfolio so that LVR continues to reduce and remain in a safe zone. Remember, I said monitoring your portfolio, particularly your LVR, is extremely important. And to help make sure that you stay motivated and inspired, check your passive income and compare it against your passive income goals so that you can see the progress that you are making. Remember, be smart, be sensible, and think long term. Borrowing to invest and shares are both long-term investment strategies. Now, as promised, this Thursday I'm going to publish part 2, the bonus episode of this topic. And I'm actually going to share with you what really annoys me about this type of product. And I'm going to explain who this type of product and strategy is suited to, because it is most definitely not for everyone. And there are particular times in people's lives when this may be appropriate or this may be a stupid danger. And by listening to this follow-up episode, you'll get a really good insight as to whether margin lending is right for you. But I will also make sure that I discuss a range of other different strategies and products that are also worth knowing about and worth considering if you want to look at supercharging your financial journey through gearing. Now, that is it for today's episode. I really hope that you've found it informative and helpful. If you have a particular episode request, make sure you shoot me through a DM on Instagram at SugarMamaTV, and I will most definitely make sure that I come back to you and talk about this topic that you need to hear about or want to hear about. But in the meantime, if you could take a split second to leave me a rating and review if you're enjoying this podcast channel. Because for me, every rating and review inspires and motivates me to keep going in creating this free, educational, and informative content for you that is not only going to benefit you right now, but well into the future, where you are so glad, so relieved that you listened and applied my advice in your life, creating greater financial freedom, peace of mind, and independence. Thank you everyone for listening. This is Sugar Mama's Fire Play.